Okay, we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I will wait a few seconds before I get started, but just a few seconds because I have a lot of questions today and they're pretty meaty questions. So I want to get into this pretty quickly. Hi, everybody. Welcome in, welcome in. How are you doing today? I am curious. Tell me where you guys are, what is this? I don't know what the word is, but tell me where you guys are from. Where you are tuning in from. Tuning, that was the word I was looking for. That's not even a hard word. What's going on with me? Okay, tell me where you're tuning in from. I'm going to just introduce myself to anybody who might be new to me or unfamiliar. My name is Brittany Nicole. I'm a writer, teacher, and coach, and I talk about language and the nervous system and behavior. A lot of my content is decoding relationship aspects and teaching you how you can use your mind to level up your life and really become the master of your own being. So before we get into this, I want to just tell you some ways that you can work with me and get in touch with me if you hear anything that's interesting here and you are like, yeah, teach me more. I want to know more about that. You can get a copy of my free course, Reprogramming 101, at my website, brittanynicole.com. I'm going to recommend that as a resource during the live as well, because that is a framework that I use and teach. And I find that whether you're working with me or not, it's really useful to have that framework in mind when working with your own mind. So please get yourself access to that course. It's completely free. If you are interested in working with me, I do one-on-one sessions. You can work with me one-on-one, like a single session, or I also do executive and long-term coaching for quarterly coaching. The new year is coming up, so this is usually the time of year where people are like planning out their goals and wanting to, look at and be intentional about what they want to accomplish in the next year. So if that's something you're interested in, then you can check out the links in my bio. Go to brittanynicole.com. All my information is there. Without further ado, let's get into this Q&A Tuesday, y'all. I got some meat. Okay, we got some meaty questions that came in. So one of the things I said I was going to do, I'm lumping some of the questions in together. I'm still going to read them. I have to paraphrase a few of them because they're kind of long, but I'm going to kind of go answer the questions under themes because there were a few themes that I noticed here. So the first theme is discernment. I have a few questions on discernment. So the first one was, how do we cultivate discernment and how do we strengthen our intuition and learn to separate it from our fears? Because most of the time we tend to confuse our intuition with anxiety or fear. So how do we identify it and listen to it? And then the second question on discernment, there might be another one, but the one that I have right in front of me is, how does one teach their child discernment? So let's talk about discernment. Let's get into it because I got some stuff to say about this. Is anyone here, actually tell me, like, what's your experience with discernment? What if you had to rate your ability to discern on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me where you're at. I'm curious about that. But okay, so to the first question, how do we cultivate discernment? I want to start with contextualizing what discernment even is for the sake of this conversation so that we're on the same page. Now, when I talk about discernment, I am really talking about being able to differentiate one thing from another. And that sounds very simple and maybe kind of meta, and it is. But the reason that that's challenging is because often our ability to discern things is interrupted by receiving mixed signals and trying to determine if we're receiving mixed signals or if our interpretation of what we're seeing is incorrect. So cultivating discernment is about sharpening your perception. And the first thing that I'm going to ask for the first thing that I'm going to mention for the person who said, how do we separate it from our fears, is get familiar with your fear. And so I'm going to talk specifically what I mean by that, because I feel like people say stuff like that and they don't be specific. What I specifically mean is fear just like any other emotion, is a sensation in your body. I like to think of emotions like a chemical cocktail that you are running in your system, and it produces a real lived felt experience in your body. And that can be different from my body to your body to anybody else's body. So for the person who asked this question, you need to get familiar with the sensation of your fear. And my recommendation would be microdosing the things that you are afraid of. Healthy doses, not like, if you're afraid of heights, I'm not telling you to go jump out of a plane. Like that might be a little bit too much, but getting honest with yourself about the things that you are afraid of and finding gentle ways to microdose that fear for the reason for you to, I'm going to use the word appetite, even though that might sound a little bit abstract. I want you to develop an appetite for your fear in two ways. When you think about somebody like a sommelier who, when they experience wine, they can name the notes and, where the grapes and all the different little textures comes from the wine. They're very familiar when they're tasting the wine. They have a very defined, articulated palette about what they're experiencing. I want you to be able to have that with your fear. So let's say you're at work and you have to give a presentation on something. How are you feeling before you give that presentation? Like, what's the actual experience in your body? Is your heart rate increased? Are your armpits sweaty? That's me. When my nerves get bad, them armpits start sweating, okay? So I'll use myself for an example. If I am experiencing fear-like stress, my temperature increases. I start sweating. I start talking fast, and I have this overall sensation in my body of being fried. So when I get that feeling of like I feel fried, that's when I'm like, okay, this is fear. So what I want for you to be able to develop your discernment is, what does the texture of your fear feel like? Notice that texture and that sensation, and then also give it a name. Because the more you can name and articulate things that are ambiguous or hard to word, that's how you build your discernment. Discernment, a lot of it is, like I said earlier, being able to differentiate one thing from another. And that's how we can use language to our advantage. So what's popping in my head right now, I had this moment with my nephew a few years ago. We were at a family reunion. And we passed by someone who was unhoused, and they had a sign, and they were looking for support and asking for money. And he had never seen anything like that before. And that was so devastating for him to realize like that some people are experiencing that. And in that moment, I looked at him and I realized he is experiencing empathy for the first time. And I didn't have someone to give me language the first time I experienced an emotion, so that going forward, I knew, oh, this is what this emotion feels like. But in that moment, I had a conversation with him and I said, that feeling that you're feeling in your heart right now, that sadness that you have for him, that care that you have for his well-being, that's empathy. And I understand that you're sad and it's hard to see another human being experiencing that. But it's good that your heart is awake and that you can relate to his humanness. So for yourself, developing discernment, work on figuring out the difference between your sensations, being able to differentiate fear from anger, love from lust. Like that will help you when you're navigating your world to call things what they are. Let me just see if I have any questions before I go on. Do you mean we should tame our fears or become buddies with our fears? I don't mean taming. Actually. I mean, I more so mean becoming buddies, because your body produces a fear experience for you to protect you from what it thinks you can't survive. And so if you take the approach of, I'm going to tame my fear, that's you making an enemy of yourself. Your body is not trying to harm you or punish you by giving you the experience of fear. It's trying to let you know, I'm afraid. And so if you have a relationship with your body and with your sensations, when you experience that I'm afraid feeling, then it's time to be like, okay, what am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of this? Who told me that this was something to fear? What resources do I have? How can I navigate this fear? And one thing I meant to say earlier that I forgot when I was talking about microdosing fear. So the reason I say microdosing is because when you can create survivable feedback loops around the things that you're afraid of, you're teaching your mind and your body, I can survive this. The more you survive it, the more you develop trust and confidence that you can survive it in the future. And having confidence around your ability to navigate fear, it builds courage. And that courage can apply to anything else in your life where fear might show up. I've told this story before, so forgive me if you've heard it, but it's apropos for the moment, which is that when before I quit my corporate job and I started doing this full time, I hired a coach whose expertise was fear. And that is because I wanted to give myself kind of an exposure therapy to the sensation of fear so that I could navigate it the rest of my entrepreneurial journey, because I knew it was going to find me everywhere I went. And one of the reasons, he was an expert in fear, but he was also a man. And that was something that made my body feel fear. And having intimate conversations with a man every week about my feelings and my thoughts, like that was terrifying for me at the time. And but this was also a safe way for me to play with and experience this fear. And it did help me to get more comfortable with the sensation of fear. Now, that doesn't mean the sensation of fear goes away. So long as your body wants you alive, you're gonna be afraid sometimes. But what I want for you is to recognize that fear is a message, and to develop the comfort of being with that message. Let me see if I missed anything else. Okay, so I think I'm caught up. Okay, so I'll go to the next question now on discernment, which is, how does one teach their child discernment? So I touched on that a little bit when I was talking about the example with my nephew, which is so let me rewind a little bit. This was a parent that was asking me this question. So there's a few things that you need to do with yourself first before you can teach your child discernment. One is, where's your discernment? Like, what's your discernment hit info? What is your relationship with your own discernment? Because if you are unsure of your ability to discern, or you don't have confidence in your ability to discern, not only are you going to need to figure out how to teach your child, but you're going to have to figure out how to teach yourself. So I'm going to start with you, the parent who asked this question, by saying, question and interrogate from a place of curiosity, not critique, what your relationship is with your own energy and being able to discern when words don't match energy. So an example of words not matching energy, like on the low end of the scale, would be someone saying they're fine when they're clearly not fine, right? If you're faced with that scenario, someone saying they're fine and they're clearly not fine, do you look at that and say, that person is definitely not fine? Or do you look at that and say, well, they said they're fine, so they must be fine? If you are struggling to be able to discern things like when energy does not match words, you have to work on your discernment first. As far as teaching your child, my experience with children and being a child who is now an adult is that often children are naturally very discerning. And especially if the child is gifted or very intelligent or very sensitive. Sometimes parents treat that as a burden or as an annoyance. And you ain't got time to hear what your child is saying when it's true but inconvenient for you. So what I would say is be careful about dismissing your child's natural intuition or their natural curiosity or their natural observation of things. I would say encourage their observation. So I don't have children myself, but I'm the self-proclaimed fun auntie, and I think my results speak for themselves. So I'm going to call myself the fun auntie. And something that I do with my nephew when he is observing or when he's naming his observations of things, I just let him name them. I won't necessarily confirm my perspective or deny his perspective. I want him to feel that it's safe for him to make observations and that he can trust his own mind and he can trust his ability to perceive. So I think that's the most important thing here is with children. They are very curious. They're very observant. And we have to be careful not to shut down their observations. The other thing is we can teach them. I do think that discernment is refined and deepened when you experience something, but what we can give them is patterns. So I knew that my nephew is very intelligent, and I knew that he, like me in school, would be perceived as a disruptor for his perspective. And so I have been giving him certain words to be able to understand. One of the words was gaslighting, because that was a very important word that I didn't get until I was an adult. And I explained to him, when someone is gaslighting you, that's you have your reality and they have their reality, and they're trying to say that the only thing that's true is what they say is true. And you have the right to perceive what you perceive. You have the right to your mind. You have the right to your emotions. So I think something that can help build their discernment is giving them patterns to be able to tell when, what do I want to say? Giving them patterns to be able to understand that their perception isn't incorrect just because others say that it's incorrect. Another thing is also giving them the pattern that people will not always like them, but communicating that in a child-friendly way. So I think a lot of children, it's normal that when they go to school, they want to fit in, they, want friends. Who doesn't want that? But I think there's merit and value in explaining to them that it is normal if you don't get along with everyone. Some people, no matter what you do or how nice you are or how good your personality is, they're just not going to be for you. And that's going to be true your entire life. So preparing them with these lessons about how to navigate social dynamics and what to realistically expect, but doing it in a way that obviously speaks to wherever their age is. Okay, do I have another discernment question? Let me see what I got here. Okay, I think that's it for what I have on discernment. This is kind of discernment, but I'm putting this question under the category of community. So the question is, I have keen pattern recognition. Unfortunately, in the toxic environment of my community, I have always been penalized for this. Of particular frustration is when I identify issues in a straightforward and logical way. I am admonished for being negative. How can collaboration happen to become solution-based if you always see the problem before others? So you're always labeled the problem or the downer for addressing important things. So let me just paraphrase this a little bit. It sounds like what you're saying is you are in an environment that does not value your skill of pattern recognition. You're calling out the issues way before they happen. That's not being valued. It's not being appreciated. In fact, they're basically like, shut the hell up. I don't want to hear that. And so, yeah, I can relate. Who here can relate with that? I feel like I attract a very high pattern recognition audience. So you're not alone in that. But here's what I want to say. You need to make a choice here, because you have the opportunity to be the disruptor, which is hard but innovative, or to choose an environment that actually values the skill that you have. And I don't think that either direction is necessarily wrong. The question really is, what do you want to experience? Do you want to experience a community that values your skills? Or do you want to experience a community where you are the disruptor of the environment? There could be merit in both. Question, can you talk about pattern recognition for a minute? To what end? Is there something specific about pattern recognition that you're asking about? But yes, to this environment, I don't know you well enough, so I can't tell you which decision is right, but I do think that there is merit in when you have pattern recognition, at least for a little bit, as much as you can tolerate it, being in an environment where your perspective is not valued. And what you have to do is change your expectation. I am not going to be valued in this environment. However, this is an experience for me of whatever your experience is. If it were me and I were choosing to be in an environment where my perspective is not valued, it would be because I'm studying behavior. So I am studying a pattern in this environment of how people behave when their perspectives are challenged, what things people pay attention to and what they don't pay attention to. I would turn this into a training ground for me and my skills, but I wouldn't expect to be valued. Now that's difficult because it doesn't feel good to be in a community where your gifts are not valued. So it may not be sustainable, but depending on why you're in the community or why that's important for you, or, you know, what your connection is to this community, it might be important for you to stay there rather than just walking away. But if being the change in this environment is not more important to you than being valued, then that's important to note for yourself. If being valued by your community is more important for you, then I'm sorry to tell you, but in this environment where people are demonstrating, you said it. You said I have very keen pattern recognition. Now, what's the pattern here of these people? They don't value what you got to say. Okay. Is that going to change? How likely is that to change? If you are in an environment where people have a pattern for not valuing your pattern recognition, how likely is that to change? If you value being valued, then you need to consider whether you want to stay where you are not valued. What does pattern recognition mean? Ooh, how do I answer that? Because it's kind of a meta question. Pattern recognition basically, maybe I can give you a metaphor. So one of the most important patterns that I recognized was how the nervous system relates to everything. Everything. And so once I had a few years ago, I had a nervous breakdown, y'all. I was having panic attacks every day. I was very, very ill. And I had to learn a lot about my body. I had to learn a lot about my hormones. I had to learn a lot about the way the nervous system works because I had to repair myself. No doctor could help me. And so in that study of learning about neural pathways, about learning about hormonal pathways, I started to realize that there's kind of a rhythm when it comes to energy and the brain and the nervous system. And so now that I understand that there's a certain cause and effect response always when it comes to like neural repatterning, I can apply that to anything because I understand the pattern. So in my work, I work on identity with my clients. We're usually shifting their perspective of their self from one thing to another. Let's say somebody is lacking confidence, right? And they want to feel more confident in their career. So I, as a practitioner, have enough experience with the pattern of seeing what it takes for a person to shift their perspective of themselves, that the pattern I can apply to anybody, even if it's a different situation. So yeah, that's what pattern recognition is. How do we stay safe and not isolated if we have pattern recognition? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, because my question is, why is there the assumption that you're not safe? I might need a little bit more context there. Are you saying, how do we stay safe in like the environment I was talking about earlier where the pattern recognition wasn't valued? Give me a little bit more context there and I'll come back to that. So to summarize the question that I got about pattern recognition, make a choice. Do you want to be the disruptor and sharpen your pattern recognition? Or do you want to be valued? No wrong choice. It's just up to what's more important to you. Because we are often seen as the troublemaker. Yeah. So here's what I'll say about my own experience with this. My entire life, noticing the pattern and speaking clearly and logically about something that I have observed. When I was in an environment where the preference was global confusion, me speaking with clarity is seen as an attack. It's seen as a problem. That's been the story of my life. So I very much know what you mean by feeling like a troublemaker for bringing up the pattern, or, feeling frustrated for calling out the problems. The reason that happens is because some people, whether it's an individual or it's the theme of the community, they prefer to be in relation with an idea of themselves rather than to actually be in relationship with the reality of themselves. And if that is the frequency of that environment, or if that is the inner state of that person, the only way that's going to change is if they have the desire to change it. So someone who wants you to be confused, or who doesn't want you to see them accurately, who doesn't want you to name their behaviors, who doesn't want to be held accountable, or communities who don't actually want to solve problems that are being noticed. In order for that to change, those people need to change their being. They need to change their discomfort with their true self-perception. And that part's not on you. So your choice is, do I navigate this? Do I find a way to make this environment work for me, or do I choose somewhere else? As far as staying safe, I think part of staying safe might be removing your expectation that it will be different. And that doesn't feel good, but if you take your attention away from the hope that it will be different, you can reallocate those resources to something else. You will need to either resource yourself more deeply in your own validation, or find resources outside of that community to affirm your clarity and your to confirm that you are not a troublemaker. And that's the thing that's so frustrating sometimes about having high pattern recognition and being passionate about wanting something to be better, is that you think, and this is something that I experienced in my religious culture upbringing, which is the reason why I separated myself. I had a belief that if I expressed issues and provided solutions, that would be welcome. But in an environment where they don't see the dysfunction, they don't want to acknowledge the dysfunction, it's not going to be welcome, because the dysfunction is wanted. Health, wholeness, functionality is not wanted. That's not valued there. So it's hard to be in that, and it's hard to be in that type of environment and stay safe, if you're meaning safe from like an emotional, psychological standpoint, because it's draining, you will need to affirm yourself and find that outside of that environment in other people who do value the same things as you. I have a resource on my Substack. Let me see if I can, I should have put the link. I should have copied the link. Well, anyway, the article is called Free Resources. And in that article, there is a list of values. And I use that often with my clients. There's two things that I would recommend. There's a values list and there's an energetic needs list. And I use that a lot of times with my clients to help them articulate what type of community is actually going to help you feel valued, rather than you always feeling like you're going against the grain and you're in opposition, because that's draining. And if you're someone like me who's always felt like you're going against the grain and you're always in opposition, you really need to experience being somewhere where you are valued so that your body can get the difference in that sensation. How does cognitive dissonance generally influence our perception? Maybe relating to the discussion at hand. So cognitive dissonance, and I'll explain it just for those who may not know what it is. Cognitive dissonance is when you are trying to hold opposing beliefs or opposing viewpoints at the same time. And so it creates what I call a mental blur, because that's what the picture looks like in my head. And really, it's just confusion. And so imagine that you have, this might be a little bit extreme, so forgive me, but this is the example that comes in my mind because this is relevant for my background. Imagine that you're in a relationship with someone who is unhealthy, who doesn't treat you well, who harms you even, right? So you have two beliefs, right? This person loves me and this person harms me. And when you're in a toxic, abusive relationship, that's the cognitive dissonance. You're going back and forth between these beliefs because this person is demonstrating both behaviors. And what that does is it creates energetic drain and confusion. Your brain is constantly trying to reconcile which one is true. Does this person love me or is this person harming me? And you stay in a loop of trying to answer the question. The question is both. And because those things are opposing, it creates confusion and drain. And that drain shows up as affecting your nervous system, affecting your immune system, affecting your ability to think clearly. You may have a lot of brain fog. It makes you very tired. When I left that situation, I gained so much clarity of thought, clarity of mind, and also my senses came back online in a way that I didn't realize how numb I was, because all of that back and forth that you're doing, that ruminating that you're doing, it's costing you energy. Okay, so this actually is a good segue into the next theme, which is energy. I have a few questions here. Hold on real quick. Let me just give a once over to my list. Okay. So, one of the questions is, what is the best way to maintain confidence / drive / tenacity and succeed without a support system? It seems like those who do succeed, any type of endeavor, are the ones with a robust support system, close friends, partners, good parents, mentor, etc. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I agree with you and I disagree. It is easier to succeed when you have those things. It is easier. However, there are many people, and I say that because those are the people that I tend to look up to when I am down and I need reminder. There are many people who have succeeded without support or without much support at all. So the first thing I would say is, let's redo your thinking on that a little bit. One, you said, what's the best way to maintain confidence, drive, etc.? Let's throw that out. Okay, because whenever you are venturing on something that is challenging, maybe it's starting a business, maybe it's going back to school, whatever it is that's going to require grit from you, you will not always have confidence. You will not. There will be days that you are confident. There will be days that you are so insecure that you want to give up. There will be days where you're like, I can't do this no more. So the idea of maintaining confidence the entire time, that's an illusion. Okay. You can build confidence. You can resource your confidence. But I would say, don't try to put in it like it. I think one of the smartest things that I did when I started my business was realize that it was going to suck. It was going to suck. Okay. And even with having that knowing, I still wasn't prepared for all the ways that it would suck. So I would say let's have a more realistic perspective on this, that your confidence will ebb and flow. You want to train your confidence, but you don't expect yourself to constantly have it. Now let's address the succeeding without a support system. That is challenging, and there is nothing that I can say that's going to make it feel better there's nothing that I can say that's going to make pursuing success without a support system feel better. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't. But one of the things that I think, rather than trying to pursue confidence and rather than telling yourself, I can't succeed without a support system, is to look at whatever you are trying to succeed in as an opportunity for you to develop range. And I think having energetic range, having emotional range will give you a lot more foundation and will sustain you a lot more through the process, because you're going to have ups and downs that people who don't go after the things that they want will never have. It's much easier to live a life that is on script, that is, that follows the program. And so somebody who is following the script that they have inherited and that they have been given is not going to have the challenges that you have, which means your best friend is going to be falling in love with the process and developing range. And so something that's really helped me has been really, really tracking my growth so that I have the reward of looking back at the ways that I used to think or the ways that I used to operate and saying, wow, like I've really changed. I've really worked on myself. I've really become somebody different. My thoughts are different. The way I carry myself is different. My skills have improved, etc. So, I think you're going to have to let the process become your pleasure. And this is why a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, I heard this before I started a business and I didn't get it until after, which is like, you got to be kind of off. Like you gotta kind of have an appetite for pain a little bit. You have to be someone who enjoys a challenge, who goes against the grain, who wants to push themselves, who wants to take it to their edges. You have to fall in love with mastery as a process, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And the best thing I think you could do to prepare yourself for that or to support yourself through that process is give yourself a break. When it's hard, let it be hard. When you're struggling, don't tell yourself you're not struggling. When you are like confused and don't know what your next step is, don't tell yourself you do. Be honest with yourself. I'm struggling right now. Okay, this is hard. I don't know what my next step is. I don't know how I'm going to be able to continue this without support. Sometimes admitting those feelings, even though they feel vulnerable or they feel like weakness, that's the strength. Because going back to like what we were talking about earlier in the community, the community question where the person was saying, I'm the one who is pointing out the problem and the community is not wanting to look at it. And they're saying that I'm the problem for bringing it up. We can do that with ourselves too. We don't want to sit in the vulnerability of the fact that the problem exists. We don't want to sit in the vulnerability of our loneliness. We don't want to sit in the vulnerability of our lack of support. So we tell ourselves, I don't need support, or I can't do it without support, or something that feels like we have more control than just saying, I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep going even though I don't know, is one of the strongest mentalities I know of. Would you say having emotional range equals more freedom or not? Oh, absolutely more freedom. Infinitely more freedom having emotional range. Because when you have emotional range, you get to experience life as a thing that's happening with you and not necessarily to you, no matter what you go through. Having emotional range is like having the skill of being able to extract beauty from even the most awful moments, or extract lessons from even the most awful moments. And a lot of my work, I talk about alchemizing the uncomfortable emotions, alchemizing shame, alchemizing envy, alchemizing discomfort. When you so much of our limitations as beings and so much of our dysfunction as beings is because we have this whole range of emotions, and we only want the good ones. We only want to feel like happy and nice and comfortable, and yeah, like that's not the whole thing. That's not the whole experience. You're going to feel the stuff on this side too. And if you know how to ride the ride of, your shame, you know how to ride the ride of your fear, you know how to ride the ride of your envy, then you can experience that side of your humanity and find the gold and the beauty in that. Envy is a really, really useful emotion to alchemize for yourself, because if there's someone, I don't know anybody who hasn't experienced looking at someone who has something, whether it's the way they look or the way they are or something they have, and they're like, damn, I want that. I want that. And there's two ways that we can approach that. We can say, damn, I want that. And we can tear them down, shit on them, say negative things about them to make ourselves feel bigger, to make ourselves feel better. Or we can say, damn, I want that. If they have that, I can have that too. And being able to, when I say emotional range, I'm talking about doing the latter, being able to be with those uncomfortable emotions and seeing, I can still use this. I can use this as fuel. Okay, next question. Okay. Oh yes, this one is good. I haven't exercised for Shawty. Getting a phone call, sorry. Okay, so here's a question. I'm in my late 30s, finding myself in a familiar pattern of lostness, aimlessness from my 20s after a year of not working due to a disability, feeling unable to direct my days productively and create any forward motion creatively. How to break out of the depression loop and create forward movement for self, feeling like my executive function is non-existent. So I have something practical for you, but I just want to say here too. You said, where was it? I'm feeling unable to direct my days productively. Okay, that is a signal. That is a signal from your body. And you also said, you mentioned depression. You mentioned your executive function is non-existent. So without knowing you specifically, because I don't have all the up close and personal details, but I would say, listen to what your own words are telling you about your body. You don't have the capacity to be productive right now. What does productive mean to you? What is your idea of productivity? Because I'm going to make an assumption here, but it sounds like perhaps you're holding yourself to a standard of productivity that doesn't actually align with your being. Perhaps you're holding yourself to a standard of productivity that you were given. And it might be time for you to examine what that looks like. I'm not telling you to not be productive. I'm saying, is your version of productivity one that is your version of productivity the one that led you to burnout in the first place? Because if that's the case, then you need to redefine what productivity means for you. Guess what? If your executive function is struggling and you are feeling depressed, getting up and taking a shower, productive as hell. That's productive. If you are struggling to feel any aim or any direction in your life, posting and asking for help, productive. You got to give yourself more credit for what you are doing, and maybe less comparing yourself to what you are not able to do. Now, you said you took a year of not working due to a disability. I am making a little bit of assumptions here because I experienced something like that where I had to take time off from work because my body was in such a state of dysregulation that I could not function, and my job wanted like 13, 14 hours from me, and your girl ain't have it, okay? And as I began to recover, my ability to override my body, no. My body was like, bitch, no, sit your ass down, okay? I would have to, after having a work meeting, I would need to take a nap. I would need to take a nap because I was so fucking fried that I physically could not betray my body the way that I used to before. So I think that this is actually an opportunity to reevaluate your relationship with your body, your relationship with your energy, and like maybe let go some of those old frameworks that required you to operate at a speed that doesn't actually feel good to you. So here's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give all of you this as an exercise. This is something that I do with my clients. This is a framework that you can use to get more in touch with the rhythm of your energy, the rhythm of your body, and to help you to come up with ideas that will give you energy. Because right now you are recovering from burnout. You are in a state of energy conservation, right? And so rather than trying to be productive, I would say, let's gather some ways in your mind of how you can cultivate more energy for yourself. So, I want you to draw on a piece of paper something like this. This is a circle that has six slices, okay? And these are going to represent categories of energy for you. And the categories are going to be body, mind, emotions, relationships, environment, and function. I'll say that one more time. The 6 categories are body, mind, emotions, relationships, environment, and function. And each of those categories represents a slice, and it's your pie right here, okay? So I want you to do 2 things on your piece of paper. You can do this. You don't have to do this right now because I didn't prepare y'all for the lesson. You can do this later. Watch it with the replay. If the person who asked the question, if you're watching this, get that paper out, okay? You asked for solutions, I'm giving you solutions. So what you're going to do is write out which slice is which. So write body, mind, emotions, relationships, environment, function. And the first thing I want you to do is fill in what you feel like your energy level is in that area. So how much energy do you feel like you have in your body, right? If you feel right now, we're here. We're here. We don't have very much. And that's okay. We're just getting, this is kind of a report card. We're getting an idea. We're getting a snapshot of where your energy is. And we're going to do the same thing with each one. Where, what is your level of mental energy? You're going to fill that in. Okay. After you have a visual representation of your own energy to yourself, just sit with that. And the part 2 of this are going to be the questions that I'm going to give you, which will help you to figure out how can I cultivate some energy in those areas. So in the 6 categories, you have 1 question each. For the category of body, the question I want you to sit with and list out is, you're going to list out answers to this question. The question is, what physical experiences give me energy and what physical experiences drain me? So this could be anything. This could be what physical experience give me energy? Taking a nap. What physical experiences give me energy? Having a cup of tea. It doesn't have to be major. It can be anything. But just think about what actually are things that you do with your body or physical experiences you have with your body that make you feel more energized after. This is you giving yourself resources, energetic resources, like a list of things that when you're feeling depleted, you can go, okay, what kind of energy? My body is feeling tired right now. Let me see what I can do to get more energy in my body. I'm going to do that. Same thing with the mind. The question for the mind category is, what kind of thinking energizes me? And what kind of thinking patterns exhaust me? So for example, maybe learning something new energizes you, but ruminating exhausts you. You want to name that. Get some ideas flowing there. For emotions, what emotional states give me energy and which ones drain me? For relationships, what kind of people or interactions energize me and which ones deplete me? I also have a resource, the resource that I mentioned earlier on my Substack, which is iampretybrilliant.com. There is an article there that is called free resources, and one of them is an energetic needs list, and it details different dynamics in relationships and helps you to articulate and have language for what dynamics energize you and what dynamics deplete you. So get that, it's free. Get your copy of that. You can use that when answering this question. You can also come up with some of your own solutions. For environment, what environments help me feel like myself and what environments make me feel guarded? And then for function, and let me clarify when I say function here, some people use the word purpose. I don't really use purpose, and I'm not going to get into the backstory on that word. I use function because when I think of like my function in the world as a being, I think of what comes naturally to me. That's what I mean when I say that. So when I'm talking about function, I'm talking about what are the things that feel like natural contributions that you can make to the world, natural ways that you can express yourself that feel good to you. And so the question is, what activities feel like an expression of who I am and what roles or expectations drain me? Take your time with this, but this is a good thinking and feeling exercise to give you some ways to move up out of the feeling of burnout and depletion. And finally, like, be gentle with yourself. Okay. I know that taking time off didn't happen for no reason. And so don't rush yourself to get back, right? Let's take care of who and where you are now. Okay. Where are we on time? Where did you say was your free resources? At iampretybrilliant.com. That's my Substack. And there's an article there called Free Resources where I can never say free resources. There's an article there called Free Resources, and it has several of my free resources there. I also have a free course called Reprogramming One-on-One. This teaches you how the process of reprogramming your mind works. You can get that at brittanynicole.com. iampretybrilliant.com is my Substack. brittanynicole.com is my website, and there are free and paid resources on both of those places. Okay, I think I can take one more question. Oh, no, I have 2 more. Okay. Oh, wait, did I already answer that one? Yes, so 2 more. This question is, what's the best way to maintain confidence, drive, tenacity, and succeed? Oh, no, we did that one. Okay, yeah, so I just have one more question then. All right, the final question is, when I look at myself in the bathroom mirror, I enjoy the person I see physically and overall, but every time I see photos of me taken by other people, my world collapses and I end up feeling devastated and deeply saddened because I found myself ugly and it doesn't reflect what I think I look like. Is this something you've ever experienced? If yes, what are your thoughts on it? You have asked the right person this question, because this has been my exact experience. My exact experience. Let me tell you something. I, for most of my life, perceived myself as very unattractive. And there was, that might have been around 31. It might have been around 31 that I started questioning, where did I get this idea from? I remember being in a session with my therapist, and we were talking about, I don't remember all the things that we were talking about, but somehow the conversation got to hair and being a Black woman and what it means to be a Black woman with Black women's hair in the culture that I live in. And that was the moment that I decided to get locks. Specifically because I knew I had played with the idea of locks a few years prior to that, but it just seemed like too much of a commitment and I wasn't ready to make it. But then one day I got faux locks, and seeing myself with the faux locks, I, for the first time, looked in the mirror and saw someone that I was like, that's who I am. That is who I am. But I wasn't ready to make the commitment at that time. So anyway, I'm in this session with my therapist and I'm talking about hair and Black women stuff. And I came to the realization, like, why do I hate my hair? This is the hair that grows out of my head. And there is actually nothing wrong with it. This was the beginning of me being able to question the ideas that I was given about my looks, being able to question the ideas I was given about my beauty. And I became curious about what it would feel like to live without those ideas in my head. And that's when I decided to get locks. I knew that locking my hair was going to be a journey, and that the process in the beginning was not going to be the most comfortable. And I think I'm noticing a theme with myself here is like, I tend to lean toward discomfort. So I knew that getting my hair locked in the beginning, I was going to feel deeply uncomfortable and deeply unattractive. And I wanted to explore why. That's why I did it. And I knew at the end I was going to, have hair that I loved, but I wanted to explore who put these ideas in my head that there's something wrong with the way that I look. I used to look at myself and I didn't like my nose. I didn't like my lips. I didn't like my weight. I didn't like anything. And then when I traced it back to where the ideas came from, they were all external. The first person who made me question my weight, I was a child and this was an adult. And, I could reflect as an adult, like, I was just a child with a normal growing body, and that was just a cruel person who wanted to hurt me because they were miserable. And so it's like changing your perspective of your physical appearance is very hard without also changing your physical appearance. But I'm going to recommend that you start with getting curious about the ideas you were given about your beauty, getting curious about the ideas that you were given about what is or is not beautiful, because chances are you weren't born with those ideas. Chances are they came from somewhere. And the more you can get to the root of where a thought comes from, the more malleable it is. Like, once I realized I was trained to see myself as unattractive, then it became a lot easier for me to throw that idea away and to just discover what do I find attractive? Like, if I've been given all my ideas about what's beautiful and what's attractive, that actually means I don't know what I find attractive. And that's actually a good thing. That's an opportunity. That means I can discover it. So I would perhaps look at this as an opportunity for you to challenge your thoughts, challenge what ideas you were given, and give yourself space to not have any ideas. Just see what it feels like for you to take those thoughts out of your mind and not have any, and let what comes up naturally without external input surface. I sent a question. Sorry, it's last minute. Did you send it in the chat or no? Repost your question because I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it here. My locks are beautiful. Thank you. I'm so proud of them. They have come a long way, y'all. I wish I could pull up some pictures right now. I don't have them on my phone. But when I first got my locks, I remember, so my hair, I have curly hair. I have naturally curly hair. And my hair straight at the time was about here. And so I thought that like when I got my locks that I was going to have some length. Nope. I was looking very rough. Very rough. And like my first day of going to work with my locks, this lady was like, "Oh, you look so different." And I knew that was what reactions, I knew those were the reactions that I was going to get. There was also like, I was trying to apply for different jobs and I was like, is that going to be difficult for me? But I was like, I'm fucking doing it. I'm just going to do it, and whatever it is, it is. They are so beautiful as you are inside and out. Thank you. I sent it on the IG question tab. Oh, okay. I see it. So how can I better understand why I'm afraid of failure? I'm an extremely passionate person and creative at heart, and I'm never not thinking about my long-term goals and aspirations. Yet I often find myself in a state of paralysis analysis, if I'm being honest, and I'm just tired of it. Okay. So remember how we were talking about going back and figuring out the root of things? I would challenge you to explore what is your first... Oh, let me say this too. If you've never experienced failure and somebody not shaming you for failure, but maybe even encouraging failure, you might not even realize that that's an option. Like, when I'm working with my clients, they fail at things all the time. And I say fail because they see it as failure and I see it as learning. And so I'm trying to think of an example that I had recently. I had a client who's working through being able to identify and name their emotions. And they had a moment where they felt like I lost control of my emotions. And I said, you don't realize that what you did just now is good. You think that you failed because you lost control of your emotions. I think that you learned how to name when you lose control of your emotions. Before we started having this conversation, you couldn't do that. You didn't know the difference between one emotion or another. Now you can say, I was not able to maintain my emotions to the degree that I want to, which is learning. So it is possible to experience what you deem as failure as learning and continuing to, like learning and just being a part of the process. But it sounds like you have not had that experience. So what I want you to do is, in your memory, recall the first time failure felt terrible for you. And kind of pick apart what that memory is like. Who taught you that failure was a negative thing? Who taught you that failure was a thing to be avoided? Why do you have a perception that failure is shameful? Because that's what you need to separate. You need to separate the shame from your failure. Failure is not as final as we think it is. it's just like, that didn't work. Keep going. Okay. And I would say also, like, and this is not something that's going to happen immediately. Like, you got to sit down with it, explore it a little bit, explore the perception of the person who gave you the idea that failure was shameful. And that doesn't happen overnight. But once you have a grasp on, this is where I got my idea that failure is shameful, the next thing for you to decide and articulate for yourself is, how do I feel about failure? Like, what does failure mean to me? When have I actually failed according to myself? And is that a bad thing, or is it just a thing? I definitely would recommend, make sure you get my Reprogramming 101 course, because there is a fear of being seen exercise in there that I think will really help with that. Same as defining what productivity looks for you realistically, which you mentioned earlier. Yes. So a lot of what I teach is changing your relationship to negative emotions. So if someone taught you that failure is shameful, fuck that. What is failure to you? If someone taught you that productivity is burning yourself to the ground, fuck that. What is productivity to you? We're living our lives now, and we are able completely to define what things mean to us and how we want to operate according to our own values and standards. So I think I have all the questions. Yes. Okay, so I've answered all the questions. This was fun. I enjoyed this. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for everyone that participated in the conversation. Again, if you are wanting to get in touch with me to work one-on-one, I do one-on-one sessions. I also do quarterly coaching information. All of the information is available at the links in my bio. I also have books and courses that teach the concepts that I talk about here. That's available at my books and courses link in my bio. Thank you so much for joining me for this Q&A Tuesday, and I'll see you next time.